All right, so we have our blood here. It's maybe not the most realistic looking shape. We're gonna work on that in a minute. Let's take a look at our colors here, because this is probably just a little too cartoony to actually work. So again, let's grab our media in one. We'll rename this blood pool, and let's color correct that. Put this color corrector on here. Blood CC. Again, pre-divide, post-multiply up here in the inspector under options. And let's just try maybe bringing down the gamma a touch just to make this a little bit darker. That's looking better for sure. Let's rename this blood pool merge. Let's keep things consistent. Blood pool. In this blood pool merge, we're going to switch our apply mode to maybe overlay, see how that looks. Maybe take our blend down just a touch. We don't want to take it down too much because it looks fake, but a little bit just to blend this with the environment. And it will also allow this shadow to show up here. So if we have this on normal, we don't have the shadow really if this is blended all the way up. But if we switch it to overlay, it adds that shadow, and this is really realistic and we don't have to do any work. Isn't that great? I love not doing work. And then let's blend this down to be a little more natural. And I think that's probably somewhere in there. It's probably about right. Feel free to dial this into taste however you like, but that's pretty good. So what we're going to want is this blood to kind of start cooling out. And I'd say maybe this is about as big as it should be. And we're even going to maybe move this mask down a little bit. Let's take this blood mask, and here right on this same frame, let's move this all down so that we don't have that under her hair, just because that matte doesn't work very well with her hair. And we'll do something like this. So we want this to end up like this size, but the effect that we're going to use is when she disappears, remember, she's not just disappearing, she's actually kind of going back in time. And so we're going to kind of allude to that by having the blood flow forward for a while, and then it's going to kind of suck back in right before she disappears, which, you know, doesn't really make sense, but it's time travel logic in a movie. So it's going to look cool. So how we'll do that is we're going to animate this mask. So let's go down to our blood mask right here, and we're going to animate this over time. And what we want is right before she disappears at frame 341, we're going to have this blood basically already kind of sucked up here. So let's select everything in this mask, and I can go over this right here where it says shape box. I can also hit Shift B, and that will give us a little transform control here. And we're just going to kind of move this in to be a little smaller, something like that. So now this will shrink and grow over time. And we'll do the same thing here at the beginning of our shot. We'll grab our shape box and we'll scale this in. Same kind of thing. Something like that. So now over time, we have this blood pooling. We're going to have to play this back and see if the speed is about right, if it looks reasonable or not. So let's just go back to the edit page and see if we can cache this. All right, we have this cached. Let's see how it looks. We have that blood coming out. It's maybe just a little fast. I think we want to slow that down a little bit. And we're going to have that swoop in a lot faster. So actually what we could probably do is go back into Fusion. Let's open up our blood mask and grab our spline. And we're just going to select our blood mask spline. We're going to take this middle keyframe and just hold Shift and move it to the right so that this grows a lot slower throughout the shot, and then it sucks back really quick. So just shoop. Maybe even faster than that. Let's go over here just a little more. And I think even we'll make this a little bigger to start out with, just so it's not so intense. Let's see how that looks. So now it's just growing a little bit throughout the shot, and then it just goes shoop really quickly back. See how this looks. There. That's what I'm talking about. Little bit more subtle. That's what we're after. A little more subtle. Then shoop. Yeah, I think that works pretty well for the timing. We're going to adjust these keyframes again. I'll hit F on the keyboard to flatten this stuff out. And actually, this first one, let's not. Let's just flatten out this middle one, I think. So then that'll... And then that's going to disappear with our girl. So with this blood pool merge, again, we're going to have this on at 340 and off at 341. Okay. This is pretty good, but this edge looks fake. Like it's just way too nice. So what we can do is kind of roughen out this edge. And we're going to do that in kind of the same way that we made the energy in the last shot with a displace. Let's make a displace node. I'll just double click anywhere and type shift spacebar DISP, and we want displace, but we're going to displace the edges of this mask. So we're going to do a little bit of work here, and we're going to pipe this mask into the input of displace 1, the yellow input. And we'll hit 2 on the keyboard to see our output from our displace, which is a black and white image, because we're getting that from the mask. And let's grab a fast noise to drive our displacement. I'll just throw that in there. And now with our displace selected, let's go over here, and instead of radial, we'll do X and Y. And if we boost up the refraction, see this is kind of displacing stuff. What we'll need to do is adjust our fast noise. I'll hit 1 on the keyboard to bring that up in our left viewer. And let's boost up the detail and boost up the scale. And now, if we go to our displacement and refract it, there we have this kind of rougher little edge, which is what we're looking for. So that's going to make it so that when this grows, it doesn't all grow at the same time. It doesn't have that circular edge. It kind of is going over the texture of the floor. Now, this might be a little too much. We might want to boost up this fast noise, boost the scale down a little bit, just so it's not so crazy. And now we just have some subtle movement there on those edges. Now, the problem with doing it this way is this also messes with the edges around our girl, which is not going to be good. So we're going to have to reroute this somehow. And we should be able to do this with the matte control. Let's grab our matte control here, drag that in. And one other thing that matte control does is it combines mattes or masks, right? So we can take this, let's just kind of break these apart here. Think about this a little bit. This blood mask, we'll bring that into our matte control under the yellow. And then we'll bring our girl mask under the green. And instead of having the blood mask control how the masks interact, we're just going to control that with the matte control. I'll hit 2 on the keyboard to bring that up. And now we're going to have to go to our inspector to combine these better. So combine, let's combine alpha. And right now it's set on copy, which is just going to take our foreground, which is the green input here, our girl mask, and use that for our matte. What we actually want to do is add, and we basically have the same matte that we've had. The difference here is that we can take this displacement and we can run this blood mask through our displacement first, like this. Put that into our yellow. And now look, we have this wiggly outline here, and we have our nice mask here, which is what we wanted. Look at that. Look at us just rocking this. Okay. So let's get organized. This is going to be called blood displacement map fast noise. We'll call this blood displace DSP. And we'll call this blood matte MC. Just so you know, a matte, M-A-T-T-E, is the term for this image here, basically. A black and white image that controls the transparency of something, right? That controls something else. That's a matte. The difference between a matte and a mask is a shape that you draw on something that creates a matte. So a matte isn't a mask, but a mask does make a matte. So that's why we can combine these different masks and make this matte here. And then we can take the output of our matte and put it into, confusingly, the mask input of our blood pool merge. And we'll bring up media out too, and everything's good. So now we have our blood growing, but we have a little bit different edge on it. And if at any point we feel like this edge is just too wiggly, too crazy, we can select our displacement here and adjust this X refraction or the Y refraction or whatever we want to do to make it work. This seems like a lot of things to set up for just this blood. But remember, the way that we set this up is so that we can use all of these nodes for multiple different things. So we can use this girl mask that we already have, not just for one thing, but for multiple different things that we're going to use for our disappear animation. Another cool thing about having it set up this way, having the mask into the merge, is if we select this merge, we can move this texture around under the mask and kind of decide what parts might be more helpful or make more sense. If we want to have, let's say, like a little yellow highlight there on the edge, and that's great. The other thing that I want to do is add a little texture to this, like we're reflecting some of the lights off of this blood, which we already kind of started here, but we can see in our wide shots that we have these lights hanging down, these right here, these little kind of chicken lamp lights. And so we can kind of tie this back in here on this last shot by adding a reflection of one of those lights. Let's go to where this is pretty big. And again, because we have this matte all built out, we can do something like grab this chicken light texture right here, drag this in. If we hit 1 on the keyboard, that's a picture of this kind of lamp. And if we want to merge this over everything else, scale it down like this, we can limit it with this same matte. Boom, just invert that. And now this only appears within the blood, and it's super easy, right? We don't have to remask anything or do anything weird. So in our merge, let's say apply mode, let's say screen maybe, and we'll take the blend down, something like that. Maybe we'll mask this media in here. Draw a little shape around our chicken light. Soften that out a bit. So now we can put this reflection wherever we want, size it differently and everything. And we can see a reflection there in the blood. So we got to think about, okay, where would the light be? There's a light probably right above her. So we do that, maybe size this a little differently. Maybe we'll take this blend down a little bit and we can add that reflection in the blood. Pretty cool. And it depends on where you want to put it, how distracting you think that is. I think what I'll also do is add a curves adjustment to this, just because I want the bright parts to be brighter, but I want to control the darker parts and kind of how this rolls off a little bit. So let's grab our color curves right here. This is right next to the color corrector, and we'll drag this in between our media one and our merge one. And we can just kind of adjust the darker parts here like this. In fact, maybe we won't use the color curves. Maybe we'll just use our color corrector. Same thing, options, pre-divide, post-multiply. And instead, we'll bring down the gamma. That's going to do the same thing and take the saturation down a lot. There we go. So now we can see kind of that little more realistic reflection there. We can turn our blend down. And adjust that however we want. And again, because we're just animating the mask, that blood is going to grow, but the reflections are going to stay where they should be, which is what should happen. The other thing we might do is just blur this reflection a little bit like this. Zoom in. We'll just blur it a touch. And there's our blood. I'd say that looks pretty cool. One last thing is at 341. We want to make sure our reflection goes away. I think it does anyway because the matte goes away, but we'll just be sure. Just takes a second to fix that. We'll make sure everything's turned off then. Let's take a second and rename our stuff. We have light mask poly. This is going to be our chicken light media in, chicken light CC. Blur is pretty obvious what we're doing. And then chicken light MRG. And we'll move this around to be, since we're using it for multiple things, we'll just kind of spread in between these things here. All right, look at what we've already done. This is crazy. So this is all blood. Shift space UND. Hold down Alt F2. That's all blood stuff. Take our media out from there. We don't need that. Take girl mask out of here because we're going to use this for other things. And next is our disappear effect, which we already kind of have a blueprint from the other shot. We just got to build it here.